Hello everyone and welcome to CEO Journals. On today's show, I had the pleasure of speaking to Matthew Parry, the CEO and co-founder of the Good Crisp company, which is a canister crisp that continues to compete with the likes of Pringles. Matt is from South Adelaide, where the last 10 years he was part of a company that launched health-focused brands in his state and around Australia. After helping launch hundreds of brands, Matt decided that it was time to do it for himself, and that's where he came up with the idea of the Good Crisp company. In January this year, Matt, his wife, and his 3 young children packed their bags and relocated to Boulder, Colorado to focus on growing his company in America. This episode is packed full of value, where we discuss the power of branding and packaging, how to launch a product into a supermarket, how to separate yourself from the world's biggest brands, and so much more. I can't express enough how much value is packed into this discussion. So without further ado, let's dive straight into this episode. Enjoy. Hello everyone, welcome back to the CEO Journals podcast. Today on the show I have Matthew Parry, who is the CEO and founder of the Good Crisp company. Matt, how are you doing today?
Very well, thanks.
Excellent. Super excited to delve into your story and what you've got to offer the listeners, but the way I'd like you to introduce yourself is just to give a 60-second introduction of who you are and what you do.
Certainly. As you said, I'm Matt. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Good Crisp company, which is a better-for-you canister chip. So, like some of the leading brands, like a Pringles is probably a well-known one, we sell a version similar to that, but that's gluten-free, no GMOs, natural ingredients. So all of the taste and none of the guilt, a product that mums and kids feel happy eating. And we sell that in a couple of countries around the world, the US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and I manage that business.
Incredible. I can't wait to dive into more about that. You're actually the first food product-based business we've had on the show, so that's exciting as well. Different avenue.
Yeah, oh look, my pleasure.
Thank you very much. So the way I like to start all my episodes is to throw it back with my guests and ask them about their time with school. So let's focus on a 15-year-old Matt. Were you someone that found school particularly hard, or were you this person that was just a straight A student, found it dead easy?
I definitely didn't find it easy. I was certainly at that time in my life sort of, what's the minimum I need to do to get by? And not that was even necessarily a conscious decision. It's just a little bit how my natural brain works, sort of, which is, you know, more big picture, more sort of let's go, let's keep moving. So, you know, I figured, well, if I could get B's or C's and still get the same piece of paper as getting A's, why would I get A's? And so I just sort of coasted through most of school. It wasn't really until I found what I wanted to do, or a purpose, or a reason to actually try, probably, that I started to then concentrate in the second half of high school, as you have in Australia. So once I knew that I wanted to get into marketing and go to university, and I needed to get a certain score, that then gave me something to work towards, and I started trying a bit harder and got that score that I needed. But before that, in most of the school, it was about, you know, the social side of things, mucking around with friends and just doing what I needed to do to get by. Not that that is the right way to do these things, and I certainly don't encourage my kids to do the same, but that's just what I was like.
So you mentioned going to university as well, because a lot of the guests I have on the show, they're these young entrepreneurs that have actually not gone to university, or they've got started and dropped out. So did you complete university and go on to get a corporate job, or was it something that you saw through and then went into your entrepreneurial journey? Or tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yep. So I went on to university, did a 3-year marketing degree, and then actually went on later on in life and did my MBA as well. So I actually enjoy learning. I enjoy that process. I appreciate absolutely that universities and education are getting a bit of a bad rap lately, because they're not as practical and useful, and they are very expensive. But for me, I enjoy that process. I enjoy learning. I enjoy challenging the status quo and understanding. So I went through university. I came out of uni and got a job right into the CPG world, the consumer goods world, as a sales rep, and basically that's the job I had for 13 years before I started my own company. So I had a fairly strong grounding in the industry that I wanted to do. I guess what was slightly different for me was I really lucked out on the job that I got. So I landed into a small company in Australia that was importing food and brands and selling it around Australia. And because it was a small company, they gave me a lot of responsibility. I eventually ended up becoming one of a partner and shareholder. But even before that, I was encouraged to treat it as my own company. I was given lots of flexibility. And so I've got a very strong entrepreneurial itch, but I was able to scratch it within that organisation and to some degree learn and play with their money and not my own. And so I was able to have a good balance of both worlds, where I felt like I was running my own business and I was, doing all of those things and creating new products and launching new products, but I didn't have to sort of leave and go out and do it on my own. So I was definitely fortunate in that situation.
That's super interesting that you've actually been able to go into that corporate job, but then you've still obviously been able to itch that entrepreneurial mindset you actually have. So have you always been entrepreneurial from a young age? Were you this kid that used to flip stuff on eBay, go to car boot sales and find stuff and try and sell them on for more, sell sweets and candy in the playground at school? Or
Yeah, actually that's exactly what I did. I mean, not that at the time, I thought about it as entrepreneurial. That wasn't a word, obviously, I'd learned till later, and to some degree it's only sort of just started to become cool in the last few years. But it just was what I did and what interests me. And now looking back, I can label it and say, I was entrepreneurial. But at the time, it was just what I was interested in. So, I mean, exactly to your point, I went to a school where we didn't have a canteen. They didn't have food there at my school. So, I thought, well, here's a problem, and I know a way to fix it. So I went out and bought, Coke and lollies and sweets and things like that from wholesalers and Costco, and then went and sold it at the school outside of the windows, and so started a school shop and was doing that. I would take toys that I didn't like and buy, sell it to other people, or buy some toys of someone else and sell it to someone that I knew would pay more for it. And just little things like that I was always interested in and always doing. So, it definitely has been a part of my upbringing, but didn't really identify it at the time as entrepreneurial.
No, and as you say, then didn't. But then as you've obviously progressed on, you've realised that is a passion and an objective that you've had. So when was it that you actually decided to then go out on your own? So you've worked in this corporate job, did you say for 13 years?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And then, so when was it that you actually decided to go out on your own, and why did you decide to have your own brand of potato chips?
Yeah, so that's a whole thing in itself. So, look, it got to the point where, I mean, as I said, I had that sort of, I've always enjoyed that entrepreneurial side, and so always in the back of my mind wanted to have my own business, but there wasn't the urgent need because I was getting some of that anyway, but knew one day I would sort of do my own thing. And so it sort of came about that I was thinking, well, I'm launching other people's brands. I'm bringing in other people's brands into Australia. I should really be doing my own brand and doing my own thing. And the idea for this product came up essentially because of my own personal circumstances. I was on quite a strict FODMAP diet, which restricts gluten and lots of other things, and so was going off a lot of the snacks that I enjoyed. Pringles was one of those, and as well I had two young daughters as well, so really looking into snacks and what we were giving them, and so I was really focusing on this healthy eating and healthy alternatives. So that was where mine was at. So wanted to sort of create my own brand, had this sort of life change, or was going through a life change around snacks. And then thirdly, I was exploring the US market and looking at trends and things there, and noticed this growing trend of better for you alternatives. So taking existing products or existing forms or trends that we'd all grown up with as kids and doing healthier versions and something that was more applicable to the way people thought and ate these days rather than 20, 30 years ago. So putting all of that together, that's sort of how I came up with this idea that, we should come up with a healthier version of a canister chip that would feel good that I would feel good eating and giving to my kids.
Yeah, for sure. But what I'm interested in, did you find that there were any like specific barriers to entry in the industry that you struggled to overcome? Because the snack industry is extremely competitive, and especially you mentioned Pringles. They're a huge name. So how did you angle yourself to then compete with these brands?
Yeah, so it's a massive industry, but it has been one that I've been working in for, as I said, 10, 13 years. So, it's everything that I knew and not as daunting as sort of someone maybe from the outside looking in and thinking, wow, how do I even start? I mean, it was what I was doing day to day. I was had a lot of understanding and inside knowledge of that. And then when I looked at the market, yes, Pringles is a massive brand, and we don't really compete directly against Pringles. They're doing their thing and they're charging ahead, and they're $1 billion. Well, that's just in the US. They're a multi-billion-dollar brand around the world. But there is a white space that I feel that they're not looking after, and that potentially is a growing space, and that's consumers that, as I say, celiacs or want gluten-free foods, people that want foods that don't have high fructose syrup or fillers or GMO ingredients, people that want to have the taste but not necessarily the nasty ingredients. So that's an area that as a small brand we can fill and we can dominate that small little segment, and we don't necessarily have to compete head on with a big brand like Pringles.
Of course, and it hits quite close to home as well, because all my cousins they're celiac. So whenever we go around there at Christmas or we go around there for food, it's all gluten free. And a few years back, there wasn't much when we had to eat these foods coming from someone that's not a celiac. Like, I don't eat a gluten free diet. The foods tended to be quite bland and not much taste to them. But the fact that now, especially with like your company as well, and all these new brands coming through, they have got a hell of a lot better. And I even find my mum buying gluten-free stuff now, even because she's tried it there and she brings it home. And you can't really taste the difference anymore. Exactly.
Sorry, but that's exactly right. I mean, that's how we position ourselves. Is we're a brand that just happens to be gluten-free. We're not a gluten-free brand. And I mean, we're a potato chip. There shouldn't be gluten in a potato chip anyway. It's just that, people put fillers or flours or other cheaper sort of material in there, and suddenly it isn't gluten-free anymore. And that's where the food industry was going for a long time. And now I guess there's this sort of counter movement towards it, saying, hey, why are we putting all this stuff in? So we don't necessarily have to change something to make this gluten-free and play around with the science of the product where it starts to get bland or weird or any of that. We're just not putting all the extra stuff in and just paring it back to what it should be. And so, we don't lose any taste, we don't lose any texture, we don't do anything like that to make our product gluten-free. And then a lot of brands are realising that and going to that. So, yeah, it is a really good time to be a celiac or to be on a gluten-free diet, because, as you say, there's significantly more and better options than even 5 to 10 years ago.
Sure, and obviously this paints a great introduction for your business. But I wanted to actually dive into the fact that you're obviously love the Australian accent. You're obviously from Australia, but you don't live there anymore. You started your business in Australia, and then you saw the potential in the US market and moved out there. Was that scary for you, leaving everything behind in your home country and moving to the US?
It was, yes, as you could imagine. I've got a wife and 3 daughters, from 3 to 9 years old, so a small young family. So that is daunting. But there's a bit of naivety there as well. I mean, even like starting a business, it's the same thing. You sort of jump in and you look back and think, wow, I can't believe I just did that. Or if you look back and think, if I knew now those things, I probably wouldn't have done it. And I think it's a little bit the same with a move like this. But, it's not like we were moving to the middle of China or something like that, where we didn't know the language, we didn't know the customs, we didn't know any of those things. I mean, it's similar to the UK. We all speak English. It's all relatively similar. Yes, Americans drive on the other side of the road and things like that, but nothing too much to get over. So from that perspective, it was an easier move than potentially it could have been. I visited, the US. I was flying there, 2, 3, 4 times a year. So it was something I was familiar with. Probably the biggest challenge that we didn't really appreciate was the isolation of that. So leaving behind all family, cousins, friends, favourite restaurants, everything we'd sort of known and grown up with, and then dropping into somewhere where there's absolutely none of that. That's probably been the biggest challenge, is then rebuilding those connections with people and the support networks and all of that, and trying to rebuild that side once you've totally removed it. So, but we weren't aware of that at the time, is often the case. So within sort of, I think it was probably about 4 months of making the decision to move, we had moved. So it was quite a quick one for us, and maybe to some degree that made it a bit easier.
So did you start this business on the side whilst you were working in your full-time job, or did you sort of dive all headfirst straight out of your job?
No, well, it was a combination of the both. And once again, I was fortunate with the company that I was working for, and as I said, I'd become a part owner of. We sort of worked on the brand and the business together, and it almost became a sub-brand of the business I was working with. So I was able to sort of once again have a bit of a hybrid of both, and launch it that way. But then eventually, once it became big enough and we knew that there was an opportunity, we then did separate the business, and it became a standalone business on its own, and we're now actually an American company and growing our business here in the US. So I was able to get a bit of a head start, a bit of a sort of an assistance there from the company, rather than having to sort of step out all on its own. So, which is also, it's something that's really handy in the snack business. When you're starting out, it's a very expensive business. You have to buy a lot of inventory. It's very expensive. So it's not something I probably could have just bootstrapped a little bit or start small to some degree. It would have taken, maybe 10 years to get to where we are now. So having the support of and the investment from my previous company helped us sort of be able to grow and get a foothold in the Australia and the US.
And it's obviously done extremely well, evidently through your numbers. Was it quick off the mark? So how did you, for the listeners that don't know, explain how you would get the product on the shelf in a supermarket?
Yeah. So you would basically, you have to do a lot of the work up front. So it's not the sort of thing where you can get sort of, a minimum viable product and sort of go and present it. There's some degree of that, but it really needs to sort of be a fair amount of work done. So you have to develop the product, get all the, work with the factory to get all the ingredients right and the taste right, the packaging right, get all that as much as you can. You don't necessarily have to push the button to get it all going, but it has to be a fairly substantially down the track product that the grocery store can look at. So then there's two ways. You can ring up the grocery store directly or try and get their details and try and get a meeting with the buyer. It happens sometimes, but it's pretty difficult because obviously they get a lot of people trying to contact them. So usually you'll have to go through either a merchandising company or a sales rep brokerage company. They're sort of called different things in different countries, but essentially there are brokerages who, they have all the contacts, they know all the buyers, they can get you a meeting with that buyer and help present your product. And for that, they take a percentage of everything that you sell, ranges 2 to 8%, depending on the type of company. But they'll take you in, you can then present to the buyer, and most grocery stores have maybe 1 or 2 look at new products each year. So for a snack category, they say, right, we're not going to look at snacks all throughout the year, and every time someone brings me something new, I have to go and change all my stores and relay them all and change all of that. So there's going to be 1, maybe 2 dates in the year where we're going to get all the snack companies to come and to present all of their products. We'll then decide which ones are going to go in, and then we'll change the store, relay it, put all the new products in, take out the old ones. All right, and that will stay there for 12 months, and then we'll do it again. So that's the other side of it. You might have the best product in the world, but if you've come after a review, it could be 12 months before you can even sort of present to that grocery store again. So timing does play a big part, but you would go in, you would present, you'd give them all the financials, you'd show them how they're going to get the product, how much you think you can sell, how much you're going to support it as far as discounts. Obviously, when you go into a grocery store, you'll see there often there's a little ticket there that says, 10% off, 20% off. That's actually funded by the brand owners, not by the store. So they want to know how you're going to help fund the product and support it and all of those things. And then if they like it, they'll say, right, we're going to relay our stores on whatever, the 1st of December. We'll send you an order and get all the product in. So that's sort of how it goes.
Never knew half of that. So obviously I haven't...
No, it's a bit in-depth, I apologize, but there's a lot to it. Yeah.
Great. So how would you go about marketing your brand? Because obviously you're not... So I'm guessing the majority of your revenue comes through supermarket sales. I've seen you on Amazon as well, but I assume the majority comes through the sales in the supermarket, right?
Correct, yep.
So it's obviously much more difficult to build yourself a brand when your product is on the shelf in a supermarket. Obviously, you can still do the normal forms of advertisement, but you can't necessarily... Correct me if I'm wrong, but from my point of view, I can't see how you would... There's certain brands you see on Facebook and Instagram that have the direct lead from social media straight to their website to click purchase. How would you go about getting someone to go into a supermarket and buy your product opposed to everything else?
Yep. So the difference with supermarkets versus online, you spend a fortune trying to get people to go to your site to buy it. There's millions of websites out there. No one just one day randomly wakes up and thinks, I'm going to type the words thegoodchristcompany.com and see what happens. So I have to spend a fortune getting you to come to my site. The opposite is true of grocery stores, thankfully. That is, I don't have to spend a cent to get thousands of people, a day sometimes or a week walking down that aisle looking for snack products. So already I've got an audience there of people that have come in ready to buy. They think, I want to buy a chip product. I'm going to come to that set and I'm going to look at it. So I don't have to spend the money getting people into stores or any of that. That's what the grocery store's for. That's why we try and get in there. So that is the difference between the two. But where the challenge is once they come in, they're standing in front of that chip aisle. They're there for literally 10, 15 seconds. How do I get them to pick up my product? And so that's why in CPG, in food world, packaging is just so important. It really is the number one advertising that you can do. To really convey your message, to stand out on shelf, to really resonate with your customers. So we spend a lot of time on packaging, and we're about to just do another big refresh of all of our packaging and make sure that we're continuing to stand out and to be relevant, because that's our biggest source of that, of advertising to some degree with that. So, we do a lot of that. To be frank, we don't do a lot of marketing. Just because we don't have the funds to do it. We're still relatively a small brand. We're still trying to sort of grow as we are through grocery and things like that. So we don't have big budgets. We have to rely on our product, and that our product stands out, that it does meet a need, and that it's winning. So often we spend a lot on in-store, so grocery ends. Can we get extra displays? How do we sort of just get our product to stand out at grocery? Yeah, is really the key focus when we talk about grocery stores.
Did you pay extra for an eye-level product on a shelf, for example, opposed to being on the bottom shelf?
You can do. It's not really something that's available to smaller brands like us these days. And supermarkets are getting better at that. They say, well, look, everyone earns their spot versus sales. So to be frank, usually at these days, if you go into grocery store. It's their own private label that tends to take up the middle shelf. But if you sell well, if you hold your own, if you continue to show that we are bringing customers in that we're buying, you'll get better position. And brands that don't get sort of worse position. Now, there are the big, the Unilevers and the Kellogg's of the world that do have a bit more pull there and can force stores to give them better positions. But generally, you are up to the mercy of a grocery store. But part of the job of me and our sales team is to get the data and show stores why we deserve a better spot or why we deserve more facings or a bigger presence on the shelf. So it's not all about money, but it definitely plays a big role.
And I find this all so interesting because obviously it's not something I've delved into before, so I'm learning so much. But where can you see your brand progressing then? Because obviously you say you're very new. Would you still? I'd say you'd probably still consider yourself in the startup phase. You've been going for 4 years, if I'm correct. But so, do you plan to?
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So do you plan to branch out into the broader snack industry and create other snacks, or do you solely see yourself being in this niche of potato chips?
For the short to medium term, I really think our future is in potato chips, and particularly in canister potato chips. I think there's that much potential and that much market share to still be gained. We're just scratching the surface. We're in 8,500 stores here in the US, and that sounds like a lot, but as I say, it's really just scratching the surface. So we think there's a lot more growth there through stores. We've got 3 flavors, so we think we're bringing out another 3 flavors next year, and we think we can grow our range there through just different flavors and different excitement in the category and innovation. So I'm confident there's enough for us just to focus on what we do and do that really well, to become leaders in canister chips. Without needing to branch out into, puffs or, all other types of products. There's lots of other brands out there that do a really good job of that, and they can continue to do that. But what does we as a brand, what do we stand? What can we do? What can we stand for? And what can we do really well? And go narrow and deep on that.
No, super interesting as well. So do you plan on coming to the UK? Because I know my family, for example, would definitely buy your product being celiac.
Yeah, look, and the UK is a market we do continue to keep looking at. Probably similar to Australia, it is a very tough market. You've got a couple of, big retailers that control so much market share. Your Tesco, your Asda, Sainsbury, they sort of have so much money. You've got Whole Foods there, but it's from memory, maybe 10 stores or something like that, whilst Whole Foods here is 500 stores. So there's less of that sort of healthier niche stores that we can go in and gain a foothold and build from there. So, we will go to the UK, definitely. It's just a matter of timing, really, and understanding the market and then having the funds to invest in that and to grow our brand in another country, because that's not cheap either. I mean, it's not a matter of just putting your product on shelf. To your point earlier, we do have to support it. We do have to have a lot of infrastructure there and some marketing funds and growing awareness. So it's not a small expense to start a new country, but definitely the UK population-wise, I mean, you guys are the number one eaters of potato crisps per capita, so there's definitely a market there for sure.
You've dropped some incredible value, and I can't thank you enough. As I can't say again, it's all brand new information to me, and I imagine for many of the listeners as well. But so the way I like to round off all my episodes is by asking 3 questions on 3 topics I don't think are spoken about enough and need to be spoken more about. These are money, relationships, and death. Sounds morbid, I know, for the last question of the day, but it'll be fine and we'll get to it. So my first question in relation to money is, what does the word success mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you sort of connected those two, because normally we do money and success, but I don't think they are actually related to each other.
That's why I asked.
So, yeah. Success specifically for me, and it's changed over the years, obviously, but now with a family and that, and all of the uncertainty that comes and continues to come with growing a business, for me at the moment, success looks like, having a lot of that uncertainty removed. So, knowing that I can provide for my family, knowing that, we're secure and that I can provide the things that they need. Maybe not all the things they want, but the things they need, and I can provide a good life for my family. That for me is what success looks like. As I say, that changes. But for me now, where we're experiencing a lot of that uncertainty on a daily basis, that's the thing that's really important to me and what I strive for.
And I love that. And that feeds perfectly into my next question with regards to the relationships. So throughout your journey so far, have you found it difficult to maintain relationships with others, whether that's with your family, friends, your wife, kids? How have you found that you've managed to balance your time between not necessarily the quantity of time, but the quality of time you spend with your family and friends, opposed to on your business itself?
Yeah, it is difficult, definitely. And whilst I probably find that I have more flexibility running a business as far as being physically present. So, if I need to leave in the afternoon and go and spend some time with my kids or whatever, I can do that. I have that flexibility. But I find mentally being present is more of a difficult one, especially when things are tough or you got a lot on your mind. I might physically be there, but mentally I'm often not, and I'm checked out, or I'm thinking about things, or I'm going over them in my mind. And so I'm not always present and in the moment. So that's, for me, it is a struggle, and I don't really have that sorted out, and I work on it. But I think someone said to me the other day, just going back to that quality versus, quality time, thing like that. It was actually saying to me, especially around children, and I'm a firm believer of this now, that quality time versus quantity time is actually a myth. Kids don't want quality time. They want quantity. So it doesn't matter if I've only got an hour to spend with the kids and I take them to Disneyland and all of these things and do all amazing things. They don't actually want that. They would rather have 2 hours of just sitting there being with them, colouring in a book, than an hour worth of quality. And that really shook up my mindset a fair bit, because you overcompensate with gifts and things like that because you feel bad. But kids don't actually want that. They want quantity versus quality. So that for me has been a shift that I'm actually working on more, and saying, well, hey, I don't have to do all this fancy stuff. I just have to be there and present. And the more I can do that, the better father I'm going to be for my kids.
I love that. It's nice to hear as well, because obviously most of the people I talk to on this show are very young. They don't actually have a family yet. So actually hearing that from a father is really nice to hear. So final question in relation to death is, are you afraid of dying?
I'm afraid of dying from the sense that I don't want to die. I think that would be very sad. I obviously, if I die, I've got no control after what happens next, but of the people that I leave behind and my family and things like that. So from that aspect, yeah, I'm afraid of dying, because it's not that convenient, to be honest. But outside of that, no. You do the best you can here and you go on. But and maybe going back right around full circle to sort of what I was saying about, my attitude to school and things and my big picture. If I can't control it, I don't worry about it. And that's how I feel about death. I can't control that, so why worry about it?
That is my attitude down to a T as well. So I can completely resonate with that. Matt, you've dropped some incredible value, so I can't thank you enough again for your time. So for the listeners that want to follow up with you or have any questions about you and your business, where can they find you? Where can they contact you? Welcome to chat to anybody. And probably the most easiest way is through LinkedIn. I'm on there, Matthew Parry, Parry. And happy to speak. Amazing. And for the listeners, I will link those in the show notes below, so you can just simply click and connect. Simple as that. Matt, any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
No, not really. I'm not don't have any wise or have any words of wisdom, but, essentially, it's a bit cliche, but we always say, look, if you think you want to try something, just now's the time to do it. jump in. Like me, I'm not necessarily saying jump 100% in and leave everything behind. It took me 13 years of learning skills and customers and all those things before I went ahead and started my own business. But it was always with that in mind. And so if you've got that idea, start working on it and see where it takes you.
Amazing. Enjoy the process. Matt,
Yeah,
once
for sure.
again, thank you for joining me on this episode of CEO Journals. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of the podcast, and I can't thank you all enough for listening. I aim to interview some of the most incredible business owners and entrepreneurs every single week. So you can really help me out by smashing that subscribe button and by leaving me a 5-star review over in the iTunes store. It literally takes 2 seconds and will help me secure some of the greatest names in business as guests on the show. Make sure you tune into the next episode where I'm going to be talking to another incredibly interesting guest. I'll be discussing their journey and providing tips to all you aspiring and current business owners. Have a lovely rest of your day, and once again, thank you for tuning in to CEO Journals.